and Jamar, right?
And I'm Hattie.
And this is our podcast, HattieJo. And this episode, we're continuing on with our focus on emotions.
For 2020.
Yeah. And so this month, we are going to discuss the emotion of anger. If you couldn't tell the beginning of the podcast, that was my demonstration of anger. I'm a very angry person inside, and this is my opportunity to let
you are.
Nah, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I was startled not only because I wasn't expecting a loud noise, but I've never seen you demonstrate your anger in that way.
Yeah. And I wouldn't, I would definitely, I'm not a screamer.
No,
yeah.
But I will say, the 2 times I've seen you, get angry, your voice has risen in loudness, but it has never been that, never been like that at all. So anger. Anger.
So what, in your mind, what comes to mind when somebody describes, what do you feel or think about when somebody says anger? What does that make you think about?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about anger, the first word that comes to mind when I hear anger is shame. And that's because I associate anger with, I must have done something wrong. Even though there's plenty of things that people can be angry about in the world that have nothing to do with me or are in no way my fault. But still, the first thing, when you say to me anger, what comes to mind is, I did something that caused them to be angry, and I feel bad about myself because of it. I feel ashamed.
So you feel so when you hear the word anger, you think of something that you've done to cause somebody else to be angry?
Yes. Huh. Or not necessarily something that I've done. I think of the feeling of when somebody else is angry at me. And how much I hate that feeling.
So I definitely think of, when I hear the word anger, I think of the times when I have been angry.
Interesting.
And as we were kind of tossing this idea around of anger, and I started thinking about in my adulthood life, there haven't been a lot of times where I've been angry. And anytime that I have been angry, it was a result of being hurt, and that hurt caused anger inside of me.
That's so interesting you say that, because I was also thinking of in my adult life, what are things that have made me angry? And it was I could come up with some examples, but the anger was very, very brief, and most of it was sadness or that hurt. So it wasn't the hurt caused the anger. It was the situation caused me to feel angry and hurt, but the anger just didn't last very long. Or in some cases, I could have been angry, but instead I was just hurt. There wasn't none of this oh, I'm hurt, now I'm angry. It's just I'm hurt and sad, or I can see how somebody else would be angry about this, but I'm just sad,
Well, and I would say for me, my anger it doesn't get displayed a lot, because I oftentimes get to a point of where I'm so angry, or I just shut down, and I'm I get into a very secluded state where I don't want to be around anybody else. It's just I am angry right now, and I think I kind of through my childhood, I kind of learned that when I get angry, I typically I can be physical with people, or get into yelling matches and stuff like that, and it's what am I doing here? This is not productive in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So I kind of, as I've matured, I would say into adulthood, I've come to understand that my anger in the moment doesn't get me anywhere.
Right. It's not productive.
So I need to be more. I need to take a second, take a moment, and chill out and really think through the.
That's interesting you mentioned that, because one of my friends, Lauren Huckelman, she was one of my lab mates in the DeFreight lab. But
What up, Lauren?
What up, Lauren? And Layla, that's her little dog she loves. But she mentioned to me something one of her professors had said to her about how to define whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. So common definitions for introvert and extrovert are like an introvert is someone who likes to be by themselves, or an extrovert is someone who likes to be around other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's not the best definition, because you can have people like me that I love being social and I love being around people, but I can't do that 24/7. Like, I still need my me time. Yeah. Right? And like this whole quarantine, we see each other, but it's not like I've really had a ton of social opportunities with other people, and I'm not like I miss going out with other people and seeing other people, but I'm not like, it's such a negative that it's a huge bummer. Like, it's kind of like...
Yeah, but I think you get like a little bit of connection to like the outside world, which are like lab meetings and stuff like that.
True.
Like, you guys, I would say like, you guys stay connected. Yes. It's not like too much, but it's like you stay connected.
But we are getting kind of on a tangent. The point of what this has to do with anger, or with what you just said, is the comment Lauren's professor made to her was, she thinks the better definition is, how do you process your emotions? And if you're an introvert, you process your emotions by being by yourself and processing through them. And you're an extrovert if you process your emotions by talking with other people. And Lauren Heckelman and I were talking about this because she and I are both very much, we process our emotions by talking it out.
That's very true.
But neither of us, and I would say Lauren to a more extent than I, like, she's even more reluctant to classify herself as an extrovert because she also values the alone time, the quiet time by herself, and has a lot of introverted tendencies. So... But by that professor's definition, we're both definitely extroverts.
Yes.
And so it's interesting that you mentioned this about your anger, because I would classify you, by the definition I just mentioned, as an introvert. And I think that, I haven't seen it with anger a lot, but definitely with other emotions, you do not, like, talking it out to me is not your number one go-to. No. Like, being by yourself and ruminating on it is your number one go-to of how you process through it. It's something I've had to learn about you that's been interesting to me because it's so opposite from how I prefer to talk these things through. Yeah. So my question is, for this anger, would you say that your behavior in being by yourself and taking yourself away, is that something you've had to make a conscious choice as you've grown into adulthood? Because, as you say, your anger doesn't help you. In the past, you used to do all these things that are not productive. Or do you think that's just part of you maturing into your personality, and that's a normal way for you to handle your anger? Like, my question is that normal? Or is that a fully, that's not your number one go-to, but you're so disciplined, you make that conscious choice every time?
No, I would definitely say, like, it's not really, like, a conscious choice. It's something I've matured into, because I would definitely say when I was younger, like middle school, like, and even a little bit into high school, like once I got to high school, I kind of started to like mature into like kind of being alone, or not alone, but like processing like my emotions like in a quiet place by myself. And so like,
which makes sense. Like, as you're a kid, your personality hasn't fully developed. And
yeah,
I do feel
but also, like, there was 5 kids in the house, so, like, you weren't getting a lot of, like, alone time, like, just to hang out. Like, I shared a room with my brothers all the way through, like, middle school.
Yeah.
So, like, until I got to middle school, like, we were all in the same room. Like, I was always around my cousins and everything, so, like, there wasn't really anywhere. There wasn't enough space to go and be by yourself. So that, like, I just think it was just a maturing process. I don't think it's a conscious. Or now I do find myself like making a conscious decision. All right, I'm getting a little upset right now. I'm just gonna kind of like detach from the situation. I'm getting. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm getting like angry, because as I said, like there aren't a lot of things that like will take me to that place of anger. So I kind of have mechanisms to like diffuse the situation before it gets there.
That's very well put.
But yeah, so I was just, like it's just been a maturation process.
Nice. So what are some of the things, if you feel comfortable sharing, that do make you angry?
Yeah. So I would say so. By now, everyone knows like my nephew came and stayed with us, and so he like literally he took me to an angry like place, and
Not all the time, just like
not all the time. There was honestly
instances.
no, and honestly, there was just like there's maybe 2 instances where I can remember where I was like angry.
I was right there with you. I don't know if it's on those same 2 instances.
No, it wasn't on the same 2 instances.
But I definitely like. It's funny that you mentioned that because I was going to say, of the things that make me angry, I had a different example, but my second example was this.
Yeah.
Like.
And I think like any parent that like
yes, it's not this
kids,
child.
yeah.
It's any child. Like
it's
the process
kids,
of being responsible
up.
for a child. Yeah.
Yeah. So like there like one day like there was something I can't remember exactly the situation, but like we got here and like literally for like from the time I walked into the door until the time he went to bed, like I was angry the entire time. Like I was like in him like white on rice. It was like I was not letting up. And he was gonna feel my rage, and he was gonna feel my anger. And like looking back on it, like he definitely like looking back on it, he definitely understood that.
I think he felt it.
Yeah, he definitely knew that like I was upset or I was angry. Like he knew that.
Yeah.
And so like just being around him, that like was not being around him, but that moment of kind of being his uncle, that definitely was a time of anger. And it was anger because like it was a repeated offense and something that like I felt like needed to be driven home, that like this behavior wasn't acceptable. It needed to change.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was a time where I was like really angry. And I think you had gymnastics that day too.
So I was gone most of the time, yeah.
You definitely didn't see the brunt of my
anger.
Yeah.
The rage, the feeling of rage.
And I would say another time, just kind of thinking about like when I was like younger, I probably was like 3rd or 4th grade. And my grandmother Sarah was like watching us, and like there was a bunch of things going on, and like my grandma was trying to tell us to do like something, and like at this time like she watched us a lot more, and we're around her a lot more. So like
a lot more than
my grandma Catherine.
Oh. Okay.
So I can never think of a time where I like.
Grandma Catherine was angry.
Or that I was like upset with my grandma Catherine, or like angry.
I see. Okay. So this was an instance where something was happening, and you ended up getting angry at Grandma Sarah.
Yes.
Okay.
And I got really angry at her, and like I'm literally like we're in the front of like on the porch at my grandma's house. And I am
is this the house we were at Christmas?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like I am sitting there, like we're right inside on the porch there, and I'm like yelling at her, and like she's yelling at me, and we are literally like so angry at each other. And yeah, so those are the 2 like moments and like times where I can remember like being like really, really angry. And there are probably a bunch of other times where I was like angry with my brothers and sisters for like not doing what I told them to do until like kind of along that maturation process. I probably like took some of my anger out on them. But I would say that like it was just me kind of like going through an emotional growth, and I happened to like take some of those hardships out on my like siblings.
That's normal.
Yeah. So I apologize for that, guys.
You've said many times, you're like, oh, like about
Yeah.
your growing up process. So he does feel bad about it.
I do.
And that's totally fine. Yeah, for me, I would say there's a lot of things that make me frustrated, but to me, being frustrated is different than being angry.
Mm-hmm.
And usually, frustration for me is circumstantial and not related to a certain individual or their actions. Whereas, if I'm actively angry, it's because someone has done something. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, actively they chose to do a behavior that stirs up an emotional reaction in me that I don't think is, like, fair or right. Right? So there's plenty of situations that frustrate me. Like, I think we talked about it on the podcast, or maybe it wasn't on the podcast, but at first when I learned I had to take the FE exam, I was very frustrated. Mm-hmm. But to me, that's not, like, someone chose to act in a way that wasn't right. Like, that's just a circumstance. Yes. And I was irritated at the circumstance. Mm-hmm. And I think it was less about having to take the exam and more about feeling like I had way too many things on my plate, and now we added something else. It was just too much. Whereas times when I get angry is because someone has done something, and maybe that's like out in society, some person that I don't know, but like a person acted in a way I didn't think was right. That might make me angry, especially if there's larger implications or ramifications mm-hmm. that hurts people or negatively affects people. So like with situations with the Maje, it was easy for me to be frustrated a lot because of like things happen with children, right? But usually it wouldn't get past frustration because I expect children to have these things and like make mistakes, and that's part of being a child. But I would level up to anger when it was kind of like you said, okay, this is the 5th time making this mistake. Right? Like, he's old enough to know better now. Because as adults, I generally feel like, okay, you make a mistake once and then it doesn't happen again. Like, or at least not anything too similar. Yeah. As a kid, I understand that there's going to be more leeway there, but I felt like I would level up to anger when I felt like, okay, even though you're a kid, you're a bright kid, you're 10 years old, like, we've gone over this many, many times, like, this shouldn't still be happening. And that's when I would kind of get angry. But I would really only say that happened like once, maybe twice.
I would say it happened like, there wasn't a bunch of anger.
No, there wasn't a bunch of anger.
I would say maybe in the whole year that he was here, there was probably like 3 or 4.
Right. But it's just funny because I think that was kind of some of the most recent feelings of anger. The other thing that makes me angry, and I'm not proud of this, but when I get jealous, it makes me angry. Like, really? Yeah, like I don't really know how other people feel when they get jealous, but it's not like jealous of like someone having something. Like, I rarely get jealous of people's possessions or their situations. I get jealous of like in romantic relationships. And this is something I'm not, like, proud of, but I think it makes me so angry because, like, you know how we talked about I often skip the anger and just go to the hurt? Mm-hmm. I think it's, like, the future potential of hurt when I'm feeling jealous makes me angry. And so if some of the things I'm feeling jealous are, like, were to actually happen, I wouldn't be that angry, I'd just be hurt. Yes. But if it's just in my mind and hasn't happened yet, I'm not hurt. Yeah, I'm angry, right? So it's kind of weird. Yeah, I'm seeing the potential and that makes me angry. And so it's definitely a very like illogical frame of mind for me personally to be in. One of my favorite books called Ender's Game. Oh, it's such a good book. Speaking of Elijah, I read that to him. He and I loved every second of it. But there's a situation happening. One of the characters is named Bonzo, and incidentally, he's very jealous of Ender. Ender's the main character. And they're getting in an altercation. And the author writes, like, Bonzo's anger was hot, so it used him. like Ender's anger was cold, so he could use it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading that the first time I read it, and I was like, oh my god, that is exactly right. Like, anytime I'm angry because of jealousy, like, I very much feel, not that I personally feel hot, maybe I do, but I associate it with this out of control, like, my emotions are using me. Yeah, like, red hot. And, like, maybe I do get hot, you know, you sweat and everything, but, so it was just, yeah, so it was just very interesting, that word choice, because it directly captured my experience so well. And I do think there are other types of anger, more like Ender's, right? Like, he's not caught up in the moment that in that scene, but he is very angry.
Yeah.
But he was still in control of his behavior, whereas I felt like Bonzo had kind of lost control and his emotions took him over. And I personally feel that I get that way if I get super jealous or super angry. So I've worked on, because I don't like that. You know, I don't like, just like you were saying, when you get angry and do certain behaviors, it's not productive.
Yeah.
I feel the same about me, and I know logically that it's not productive. And I know also logically that a lot of the things that are going through my mind are totally unrealistic. But once I get to a certain point of anger, like, I can no longer see the logic that that's ridiculous. You know?
Gotta process it through talking.
I do, but see, I've learned like some of the things to stop me from getting, like you're saying, you had things that you do to like prevent it from getting there. That's what I've learned too, and it's talking, but it's usually talking to myself or talking to like a friend of mine.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, like, I really have to catch it and consciously be like, okay, I need to pump the brakes. Here's the things that I know, like, and coach myself through it. Because I don't like getting to that point where I feel like I'm out of control of my own self. And very rarely do I feel that, but anger is one of those things. So yeah, it's really interesting. When I mentioned that Ender's Game quote about hot anger and cold anger, do you feel like that is that something you can relate to, or?
I understand it, and I think that like there's been very few times where I've been like, I feel like whenever I get like red hot like anger, like I feel helpless, and so like there's nothing that like I can do, like there's no action to take. It kind of like, if I get into the red hot like angry like situation, like I just kind of get like I get a sense of hopelessness.
And does that fuel the anger, or does that dissipate the anger?
I would say for the most part it probably like fuels it. But it doesn't fuel it to action.
No, I understand that, but like,
but it definitely like the hopelessness like fuels the like angry feelings, and it just like becomes an endless cycle until I go to sleep and then it's like, all right, that's over with. On with my day.
So, what do you do when other people are angry with you?
I don't know. I don't feel like there are that many people that are ever really angry at me. I can't, like, honestly, off the top of my head, like, I can't think of a lot of situations where people are angry at me. I purposely, like, I am intentional about not making people angry at me. So I am a very non-confrontational person.
Same.
Although I do feel like if for whatever reason, like if I had to fight, I feel like I could fight. But like I'm not like, I don't feel like I make that many people like angry at me. There was one time we were in, like I was at Brody Gym here on East Campus, and we were playing basketball one Saturday, and like it was a like really competitive game. And there's this one guy, like, he seemed to be having just like a bad week. And we were kind of talking, going back and forth.
What about his behavior made you
Well,
feel
just
like
the
he
way he
seemed
was
to have-
talking, and like, he was just not like, he wasn't like physically aggressive, just like verbally aggressive.
Mm.
Um,
So he was behaving in a way that wasn't normal for him.
well, I wouldn't say it's not normal for him because he's a very chatty like player. It was just like we had like, and since we played that game, like we played a number of times since, and so like there has never that issue has never come up before.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm digressing. Go ahead and tell the rest
but-
of the story.
there like I felt like he and I got into like a verbal like going back and forth, and like he was angry, but I don't know if he was angry at me, and he was kind of taking, but he did, I feel like,
Take
take
it out
his
on you.
anger out on me. And yeah,
Which I think is common.
so I would like,
Not
I don't
good, but
think
common.
that like, yeah, I don't think that like there are a lot of people. I am very conscious about not making people angry with me.
Same.
So, which has like it's, yeah, I mean, you definitely try to take the politically correct side of things.
Mhm. So you mentioned also that there are steps that you take to mitigate it before it gets angry. What are some of those steps?
Just remove myself from the situation.
Mm.
Like, stop talking about it.
So just shut down entirely.
Yeah. Like, it's not that hard to do.
True. I was just wondering if there was other things that you did.
Yeah. Do you have like any pet peeves or anything that make you like angry?
I wouldn't say they make me angry, but I definitely think the definition of a pet peeve is something that, like, illogically provokes an emotional reaction out of you, whether that's, like, and it's a negative one, right? Like, there's no pet peeves that's like, I like that for no random reason. Like, that's not a pet peeve. Like, so I don't think any of my pet peeves, like, level me up to anger, but there's certain things that annoy me, or maybe might even barely scratch the surface of frustration, but usually they're just annoyances. And we've talked about this, like the blankets on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
So we have blankets, like we have our couch, but we have blankets that we will cuddle under either together or separately while we're watching TV or reading a book or whatever. And I prefer when they're not in use, aka when we're not actively on the couch with them on us, for them to be folded and hanging over the back of the couch. They're both on the other couch now because we're filming this. And part of me originally was like, well, that's better because then Amelia doesn't get them all dog hairy when we're not on the couch, and then they're not so dog hairy when we use them. But that's not actually true because we cuddle with, or at least you cuddle with Amelia too. We cuddle with Amelia all the time when we have the blankets up. So they're getting dog hairy when we use them.
Yeah.
And them being left out, it might accelerate them getting a little bit more dog hairy. But that's, in my mind, that's not like the logical reason why having them folded on the couch is better. Like, it's not hurting anybody if they're left in a lump. It's, it's not making their ability to be blankets any worse, right? They're just as good blankets whether they're left in a lump or whether they're folded. Yeah. They're just as dog hairy whether they're left in a lump or whether they're folded. But for some irrational reason, it really bothers me when they're just left in a lump. Like, I always walk by and straighten them out, like, all the time. And there's lots of little things like this, just tidiness around the house. I would say the couch blankets are the biggest one. Mm-hmm. Everything else doesn't make me as annoyed. But just general tidiness. I just like to be in a tidy, organized place. And I think part of it is that it makes me feel like things are in their place. Things are where they should be. Like I very much like having things be as they should be, right? So, like, put away, or they're, and even though it's arbitrary what my mind has decided what it should be, I prefer getting it there. So like if I could train my mind to be like, no, the way the couch covers should be is in a lump, that would solve a lot of these problems. But alas, my mind has already made it up that how it should be is not in a lump, it's folded on the edge. So, but yeah, it's just like slight annoyance. And I will say, as much of like an annoyance that is, that the very simple act for me to fold them and put them on the back of the couch takes me like, what, 10 seconds, 30 seconds? It brings me a lot of relief and joy. Like such a simple thing. It's like automatically my day is a lot better. I'm like, if that's all it takes to make me like have a little like,
yay, 10 seconds
like
to bring some joy to the day.
I'm like, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, keep leaving the things in the lump.
Transform that anger into joy.
Well, it's not even anger, but yeah. So do you have any, I would say that's my biggest pet peeve. Do you have any pet peeves?
I would say my pet peeve is like being called trifling.
Wow, I did not know that about you.
Yeah, because nobody like.
I don't say that.
No one's ever gonna be.
So explain why this is irrational. Because I don't think it's a pet peeve if it's like a logical reason. Like if someone calls me a liar when I'm not a liar, that makes me angry and annoyed and frustrated. But that's, I think that's logical. So I don't think that's a pet peeve.
Honestly, I could probably be doing something trifling, but like just that word, like if you call me like a dirtbag or like just anything, like being a liar or like doing something shady behind somebody's back, like you're doing something trifling. But like I feel like just
so it's the use of the word.
Yeah, the use of that word. Even if I have.
So even if you're exhibiting the behaviors, they could call you out for those behaviors using any other term.
Yeah,
and
I'll be cool. But like calling me trifling would definitely be like
interesting. I classify that as a pet peeve, illogical. Yeah. Huh.
So that is my pet peeve.
Happen? Like, did this used to happen in high school or anything?
This has probably happened like once or twice, and it was like a very like angry. Like I reached a very elevated angry state.
You were hot.
Yeah.
So
I was like, oh, I'm done.
Do you associate something negative with trifling?
No, I just like
just annoying.
Yeah, it's just.
So.
Oh, it's definitely a negative word. Like you don't want to be called trifling.
Well, right. Like if someone were to call you a liar, like you don't want to be called a liar. Even if you are a liar, like you don't want to be called one. So is trifling a verb or a noun?